Good morning, this is Kathy for Getting Chatty with Kathy, and I want to thank you all for joining us today. I have the Red Cross with me today, and I'm very, very excited to talk to Luke Mollander about all of the interesting things that the Red Cross does in Saskatchewan and maybe how you got there.
Yeah.
So, hello!
Hello everybody.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
So, you were earlier just talking to me, telling me that you're from Toronto?
I was raised in Mississauga, Ontario.
Yeah.
I'm originally from New Zealand.
Whoa.
We moved over here when I was young, about 6, 7, and I was raised in Mississauga, Ontario, and I always just say Toronto, so people
Toronto.
just have it's an easy geographical landing point for people.
It all, like, when you're driving through it feels like one big city anyways, if you ask me.
Right. And we all think we're the center of the world, or at least Canada.
Canada.
Yeah.
Toronto, for sure. You know, when I was an international recruiter, I would always tell people that were thinking about coming here, I was like, we're in between Vancouver and Toronto.
That's amazing.
I'm like, just slam dunk in the middle, and that's where
hilarious.
I am.
That's great.
How long does it take you to get to either one from there? Oh, just a flight or two.
Yeah. Well, these days at least there's direct flights. Remember, it didn't used to be like that.
Oh, I
Sometimes
remember.
you'd have to go all the way to Calgary, or you'd have to stop over in Winnipeg. It was a nightmare.
It's still doing that for some flights.
Yeah. Well, yeah. You got to catch the right ones. Yeah. I'm an early bird, so I always
you
get
take
to the
that
one.
6 o'clock one.
Yeah. Hey, listen, I'm up at 4 a.m. So so when I have that early flight, anyways, I feel like I've already started my day, so it doesn't seem as early for me.
Oh, it's terrible for me.
Yeah,
It's
a lot
like
of people
too
I
early.
see, they're dragging their butt in there. Yeah.
A coffee.
Yeah.
So you moved to Regina. Was it for work, I'm assuming?
Yeah. I in 2004 I got selected by the Saskatchewan Roughriders to play football here, and and it just life just
20 years later.
Yeah. It's been a great journey though. And,
So were you playing for a long time, short
Yeah,
time?
I played 9 years in the Canadian Football League. Won a Grey Cup in 2007 with the team. So
I was on that mile thing that we're out
yeah, there you go.
fun.
Yeah. Well, it's and I credit my football career for my professional career now, because not only just because there's a lot of things that transfer from being an athlete into the real world in terms of like your chances for success in the real world, but more importantly, it's how I got to the Canadian Red Cross. So I'm vice president now. I oversee everything that we do in the province, and yeah, I like I said, I feel like I'm blessed, and I feel like this community has given me a ton of opportunity in both phases of my life, and it's really nice to be able to put back into the province now, that especially when you play for 9 years and you get a lot of opportunities, so you're taking things out of the province. It's always nice to put things back in.
Well, and what people don't really understand is how significant the Red Cross is.
Yeah. So the Canadian Red Cross, I mean, we help all over the country, right? We're a national organization. We've got obvious international ties with the ICRS. So it's a real humbling experience when you look at the people and the folks that need your help and support in the province, and then you take a step back and you realize that your province is also having an impact on the things that you do nationally, and then you take another step back and you're like, wow, we can involve ourselves in international responses that need the expertise of the Canadian staff in the Canadian Red Cross, right? So you're talking Lebanon, you're talking Haiti, you're talking, right? So and obviously different forms of emergency response, whether it's social emergencies or environmental emergencies. So it's really cool to be involved in, to be honest with you.
How long has the Red Cross in Canada been?
Well, actually, so it's pretty unique, and you're gonna have to fact check me on the dates.
Okay, well, I'm not going to, but we'll guess around.
But actually, the first time a Canadian flag actually flew a Canadian Red Cross flag or a Red Cross flag flew in Canada was in Saskatchewan. It was in Batoche during the conflict in Batoche.
Really?
Yep. And so it's the first. And there's a flag out there right now that flies in Batoche. Shout out to our Métis Nation friends.
Yes, that's fantastic.
It flies in Batoche now to set that marker. So again, we're incredibly proud of the work that we do here, and I'm incredibly proud of the team that I get to work with.
Why don't you kind of compartmentalize like the different things that the Saskatchewan or Canadian, however you want to do it, kind of different little things that you yourself could give as an example of?
of the work that we do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so basically, okay, at the very simplest point, the Canadian Red Cross, we exist to just fill gaps in any level of government programming or community programming that folks have access to, right? We don't want to duplicate a service. We just want to insert ourselves where we feel we're needed and we actually have some expertise, right? So obviously when people think about the Canadian Red Cross, they think about emergency management, right? But the nice part about the emergency management thing is we're not the traditional food, clothing, and shelter organization that I think people assume the Canadian Red Cross is. We have a lot more capacity in that. And I think that that's probably where our role is best suited these days, in helping communities create their capacity to have their own emergency response teams, right? And to lead
you're
their
taking
own
it up a
community.
level.
Well, yeah. Well, in Saskatchewan specifically, 90% of the work that we do in the Canadian Red Cross is with our Indigenous communities, and our Indigenous communities have so much capacity, and they really have been advocating for their ability to lead First Nation to First Nation response, or Métis Nation to Métis Nation response, right? So Indigenous-led response is something that we really get behind, because we feel like, hey, we can help train.
I was going to say, give the tools.
Yeah, give them the tools to build their capacity.
Yeah.
And while they're building their capacity, as they need, right, to support their communities, we can fill those gaps that currently exist in their capacity, right? So it works both ways. Well, we end up walking alongside community that way, right? And
buy-in.
Yeah, and the other thing is, and now we're literally only inserting ourselves or being asked to walk alongside the parts where we're actually needed. And we don't have to get into that thing, well, we can do this, we can do this. Well, no, community's got this. All we need is the Canadian Red Cross, to help us with this. And then when we're in some downtime, we'd really like the Canadian Red Cross to come help us train so we can get to that capacity. And then at the end of the day, the Canadian Red Cross, hopefully all we become is an advisory.
That's amazing.
To just say, to make suggestions, and hey, if you need our support here, we're happy to help you out. Right? And so the traditional emergency management is where a lot of people
like forest fires we're talking about.
Yeah, right. You're talking about forest fires, but you know what I mean. Largest
flood.
Yeah, flooding. That's the other thing I was going to mention. That in the major centers, we do a ton of work with personal disaster assistance, right? So those apartment fires or floods, right? The Canadian Red Cross, we're part of that first responder team. So, for instance, if somebody was going through an unfortunate accident or a situation where their apartment block caught on fire and they had to leave, if they contacted the Canadian Red Cross, or we work with mobile crisis as well, the Canadian Red Cross could help them find a hotel to stay in. We give them some money, right? We connect them, and that's the other part of our business is connecting them to the parts of the community that can really help.
Because you understand the system, because you're training all these people basically to use it properly. So when we get into those moments where we don't know what to do, you're kind of like that arm.
Yeah, totally. And
it's wonderful.
And so for instance, the nice part about being the community connector too is again, then we're not duplicating a service. So if we talk to a family and we get to we find them a place to stay for 72 hours, right? Gives them some money and stuff, but they say, oh well, you know what? This is probably the worst timing because we're also having family fly in, right? Well, hey, let's connect you with the Regina Open Door Society. Let's connect you with a couple of the other organizations, right, that can really help you, because we're not the experts in that side, right? So that's the nice part. That's what I really enjoy about our role as well, is again that community connector model where if there's someone better to do it, then we need to connect them with that person. And I think that when you look at sort of personal disaster assistance, emergency response, our community connector model really works in sort of the newer ways that we're being asked to help Canadians in the mental health and psychosocial.
Well, I was going to ask about that, because like Saskatchewan right now has such a big epidemic with drugs and like it would be great to know what you guys can do for people in need like that.
Well, so again, the nice, I'll give you an example of where our role has really found a nice little fit. We have a program called the Friendly Calls program. Okay. Now the Friendly Calls program, one of the reasons why we really started looking at it for this province in particular is because we knew that there were a lot of folks that were isolated and lonely, especially in the rural
COVID.
parts of the country. We learned that after COVID as well, right?
Yeah.
And so what the Friendly Calls program is essentially is it pairs somebody that feels lonely or isolated or may not have a lot of family around them or
Right.
community around them. It pairs them with a trained volunteer. And that volunteer, their job, and they love this job, is to call them every week, at least once a week, and do a 45-minute phone call. It's a touch base. It's more of a mental health check-in, right?
That is so good.
But here's where our role is unique. So we really started pushing this program because we felt like we were actually helping the aging population, right? But in turn, you know, we were meeting with the SHA and, for instance, our minister of health here, Everett Hindley, and we were saying, hey, you know, does this fit a gap? And I think that where they saw the gap was, well, you know what? If we have an organization that is willing to, you know, to help with these phone calls, right? Maybe a benefit of that program is that these folks don't necessarily go back to the emergency room, right? When they don't need to. Maybe,
Right.
you know,
It's more preventative.
right, exactly. So now we're actually helping the healthcare system by taking some strain off of that, right?
Definitely.
And it's a free program. So that and that is a great example of us filling a gap, right? And for somebody that's lonely or isolated, you know, we've had all sorts of sort of examples of folks not even understanding that there are resources that they really would like around them, but fortunately,
you don't know what you don't know.
And our volunteers, you know, they're trained to make those connections. So whether it's cutting a travel and to go get an IV from 3 hours to 45 minutes down the road, whether it's finding a bridge club just for somebody to get out a little bit more, whether it's asking a question, hey, do you have groceries, right? So it's been nice, but
It's like adult Big Brothers almost, it sounds like.
Well, the nice part is so we realized there was a gap there, and we realized we could support our communities with that, right? And again, you know, we started working with the SHA because they felt like this was an appropriate program too to help with some of their gaps that they're looking to fill while they sort of concentrate on the high level stuff, right? But what we realized was, hey, there's a lot more people that aren't necessarily 55 and older that want this. So then we ended up expanding the program and opening it up to anybody who was just 18 and up.
That's wonderful. Right? So could I ask, the people that are actually talking with them, are those like volunteers?
Yeah,
or
really? They're trained volunteers.
How do you guys get volunteers?
Oh, I'm pretty sure it's redcross/volunteer.ca, but don't hold me that. Don't fact check me on that. But
I'll Google that.
Yeah,
I promise.
But I mean, yeah, you can just go to our website and volunteer, and that's, you know, it's funny. I'm glad you asked that, because it's also, if you were to ask me, hey Luke, you know, what are your major sort of like challenges in the province? I think that for us, it's engaging our volunteers, right? Because again, I think that, you know, the Canadian Red Cross, a lot of times we just think emergency management, and rightfully so, right? You see Jasper, you see the fires in BC, for instance, right? The fires that happen here that require community support. So like that's the thing, those are the things that really make the news. But again, there's plenty of other opportunities to volunteer for the Canadian Red Cross. So the Friendly Calls program is one of them. We're setting up a risk reduction team of volunteers to talk about emergency preparedness, right? Because I mean, one of the other things we realized, you know, stats are everything these days, right? You realize that if you spend $1 preparing for an emergency, you actually save $4 on the back end, right?
Wow. So who's responsible to prepare though? Like when you like this to me is like a big question, because like, is it myself personally, or am I supposed to rely on my city councilors to get this plan in place? Do you guys go to the school? Like, how do we do this?
See, that's the best part about it, right? Is that everybody's preparation plan for any type of emergency is probably different, right? Now you can talk about flooding, you know, like, and are you more susceptible, for instance, if you're at the bottom of the Cabela Valley versus where I live in Regina, right? You know, so your preparedness plan is always different. I think that the most important part of preparedness, though, is understanding resources, right? And that's what the Canadian Red Cross is really good at doing, is it just talks about and makes sense of what you may need to be prepared for in your situation, right? It's not this whole, well, you need this big kit, here you go, you better, you know what I mean? No,
Right.
it's actually like, well,
Let's
actually
be, like, thoughtful about what we're doing.
yeah, and I think that we're getting a lot better now at talking about preparedness, because it makes a lot more sense, right? So you have everything, for instance, from the fire and flood smart programs that are on the internet that the Canadian Red Cross is a big fan of. You have emergency preparedness, planning, training, but then you also, like, for instance, we also just unrolled a pillowcase project, and it's actually it's a school activity, right, that you can actually use to help younger kids wrap their mind around, like, if something were to happen in an emergency situation, what would I do, right? And the reason why we actually was, again, because our stakeholders in our community said there's a real gap in talking about preparedness to kids, right? Like, we see the Red Cross doing all this response training and psychological first aid training and things like that, but what do you guys have for kids? So our teams nationally were looking for programs, and we took the pillowcase project because it was a really effective program for the American Red Cross during Hurricane Katrina and thing. And what they realized was they saw a lot of kids and families throwing their belongings into a pillowcase, right? And taking that, and as tragic as that is, we said, well, actually, here's something that might actually help our communities, right? And if we talk about the importance of preparedness, and even at the most minor level, what to throw in a pillowcase if you do have to.
Well, this is brilliant. You
right?
know what?
Yeah.
Kids are very smart.
Yeah.
And I think giving them tools is brilliant, because then they won't worry about it.
Totally. And that's what the Red Cross wants to do.
I like
they want
that.
to provide the tools, right? And then if there are larger needs that we can actually support, and whether it's physical or financial, then we step in and we fill that gap until the community is at a point where they can do it themselves. Right, so and again, the pillowcase project, for instance, we enrolled it in Treaty 4. Our partners at File Hills Capel, right? We took their largest celebration. There was 7,000 kids there, and we taught 1,000 of them, what emergency preparedness looks like, what potentially you should throw in your pillowcase, and then the nice part is you get the fun stuff, like, hey, decorate the pillowcase. You know what I mean?
Like, make it into like a positive
make it something
experience.
for you. Well, and that's the thing. If it's a positive experience, it sticks a little bit more. And then
Doesn't
the nice part about
them.
it is, it's like my son. My son worries about that stuff too, right? His dad's the vice president of the Canadian Red Cross, right? So he always asks those questions, and it's an easy conversation for me. It's just because, well, son, I mean, the likelihood of it happening is slim to none. But if it did, at least we'd know what to do, right? And he's like, oh yeah, So again, now you get the Canadian Red Cross helping on the spectrum, right? You get us helping at the leadership level in communities, right? Providing
so do you
whatever
guys
type
meet with the city, say, and figure out a plan for?
Is
that something that would have been done? I don't know.
Yeah, so we talk with a lot of the municipalities, right? And we do, and for us, the question of the municipalities is literally, what do you need? What do you need from us? That can make your life easier, right? Is it training volunteers at a municipal level to be able to help respond to folks? Is it is it simply having the friendly calls line, for instance, broadcast a little bit more to help help people understand where their resources are?
Right.
What is it? And then from there, those municipalities say, well, you know what, so for instance, we're talking to Maple Creek, right? And one of the things that we're talking to Maple Creek again is the risk reduction program, right? Is emergency preparedness. And so, that
you're thinking about fire stuff with these people,
right? So you go in there and you sit with their councils and stuff, and you talk about just sort of where they see the challenges, and then you just leave it to them. Say, look, here's what we can do. Here's what we think might work. And they'll say things like, hey, you know what? Let's gather our team. Let's get together. Let's prepare.
That's wonderful.
But again, it's at the community's behest.
But you're showing them tools that they could use.
Right.
Again, it's kind of interesting that at each level, you're really teaching people to fish instead of fishing for them.
Yeah, no, they don't. Well, here's the thing. The folks don't want us to fish for them, right?
We want to take care of ourselves.
Yeah. Well, no, it's more importantly, it's they're perfectly capable of taking care. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I sometimes, I mean, the communities that we work with, I'm always amazed. We had an unfortunate incident this year where a few thousand people had to be evacuated from northern Saskatchewan.
That's got to be so intense for somebody.
I can't imagine. Right?
And their
Like,
pets
it's so
and
easy.
everything would be just so stressful.
It's the main message I give to our team when we're talking at our coordination meetings when this first starts happening. I said, look, we're going to be put into situations that are really adverse, right? They're not going to be easy, but we have to understand that the situation that we're going through at the moment is temporary, because we get to go home, guys. We get to go in, sleep in our beds,
Yeah.
right? We get a team around
This
us.
is their life.
These folks are leaving their home. They don't know whether they're going to have a home to go back to. But the reason I brought it up was it's improved so much over the years. You know, if I've only been vice president for 5 years, right? But before I was with the Canadian Red Cross. Before, again, I got to the Red Cross because of football. Well, that's the nice connection, right? I was an ambassador. But before, the responses were a lot more adverse, right? They were a lot more hectic. This year, in such a unfortunate situation, there were so many wins, and it was because community had the capacity. Their leadership was fantastic. We supported, in this case, finding hotel space for community members throughout PA, Saskatoon, Regina to stay when they left their homes, right? That was our role. That's one thing that they asked us to do. But community had community coordinators in every one of those sites, and it just worked so.
They were ready for it.
They were ready, and they were prepared. And that's the thing. We didn't need to fish for them. We just said, hey, they asked us for a little bit of the bait. Hey, do you have this and this? Yeah. But and the flip side of this thing, and I really think that this is a huge win for the province, not a Red Cross win at all, is that there was other communities that had to evacuate this year that you didn't hear anything from. We knew that they were evacuating. They were communicating to us, hey, just be on alert. But they had handled their transportation. They had the capacity to make the phone calls to the hotels. They had all the leadership training, right? And we were very fortunate to be able to work with them to get to that point. So it's a huge win, because you see the spectrums again, right? You see the communities that do need our support, and then the communities that are completely self-sufficient. And the nice part is the Canadian Red Cross can help in all phases.
Connect everybody.
Yeah, well, and if you need a little minor touch from them, yeah, sure, we'll send you some volunteers to sit at the tuck shop you set up. Sure, you know what I mean. Or we'll use our massive, expansive, 24-hour direct travel hotline to find empty rooms. You know what I mean? So it's nice belonging to an organization that can really help on each end of the spectrum, right? And I think that the nice thing about taking opportunities like this, and I'm grateful for it to talk to you, is that it gives you a chance to talk about how the Canadian Red Cross can help. Because like you said, you don't know what you don't know, right?
We don't know what we don't know, and I think a lot of great things are happening throughout our province. And really, like, if we don't talk about it, nobody's gonna. So we gotta sell and tell everything that's wonderful about what's happening here. And I love how the Canadian Red Cross has connected communities and are training people so that we can be nimble and resourceful in those times that are stressful.
Well, and again, the more you're able to empower the community and create community capacity, the less strain you put on your own organization, right? And the nice part is, and this is probably something that, I'm pretty sure everybody's aware of this. You don't need to be, a climate denier or climatologist to know that the fires in the summer are getting a lot worse, and they're happening more and they're happening longer, right? And the nice part about our organization too is that, hey, if I need to send a couple folks from Saskatchewan to Atlantic Canada during a hurricane, or to Alberta during Jasper, for instance, then we have that capacity as an organization to support our brothers and sisters in other provinces. But more importantly, the reason that we can do that is because our communities here in Saskatchewan don't need to lean on us heavily in some cases, because they're trained up, they've got the forces, right? They've got the capacity. So it's really nice. It's nice being able to help other parts of the region. And that's another thing too. One of the reasons I stayed in Saskatchewan is Saskatchewan as a province in general has always punched above its weight class.
I love that you say that.
Oh man, I see it. I see it more. I've seen it more than anybody. I feel I'm really fortunate to see it, because, and again, it's true. The people here are a big reason for it, right? But if you look at just sort of the size of the province, but the ability for this province to move the needle in so many critical areas and industries, it's so impressive.
1.2 million, I think. Like, we don't have a huge population.
No.
That's like,
No.
isn't that what Mississauga might have?
1.2 million too in a whole big province like this, right? Like you're right. There's 2 million people in Toronto alone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So and that's the nice thing, but it's also, you know, this is a leadership thing. You've got to learn where your leverage points are, right? And one of the things that I think that our team's been successful with, I think that other like, for instance, the Regina Food Bank, right, is you have to be a relationships person, and you have to have good people on your team, because you want those folks to develop the relationships within the province, because it's the way you move the needle. And I think that that's one of the other wins for the Canadian Red Cross in Saskatchewan. We've got a great leadership team. You know, I
Makes or breaks
right,
organization.
right. And they're good people. You know what I mean? And that's the nice thing about the Canadian Red Cross and a lot of these other nonprofits, like the Food Bank,
Right.
for instance, like United Way, right? There's people in those organizations that really want to help other people, and I think that the nice part is that when you get to start there, right? But then in the Red Cross situation, where you have so many resources to connect the people who want to help with,
Yeah.
then, you know,
Can really
it turns
help.
out being magic. Yeah.
Huge,
Yeah.
huge. Well,
Cool.
on that note, if any of you guys are listening today and think, oh, we know of this great thing going on with this organization here in the province, and you think that us listeners should know about it, reach out to me. I'm always happy to bring people on. I really love to celebrate what we're doing, or just share information to all of you, so that, you know, we're all connected in this community together.
Well, and reach out. You know what? And again, you know what? I might be the vice president, but I'm telling you right now, you would love to talk to some of our other teammates. So whenever you have a gap in the programming, we're happy to help.
Right on. Well, reach out,
Yeah.
and we're excited to hear all this stuff. Thank you very much.
No, thank you for the opportunity. And again, you guys are fantastic. We love the folks. You guys help us. You guys run you know what? You guys run a commercial for the Friendly Calls program.
Really?
For free for us. Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah, you guys.
Go Access.
Yeah, go Access. There
Yeah,
you
yeah.
go.
Well, thanks again, and you guys take care out there.